it shouldn't be up to the practitioner to track time. It should be up to the technologist to help provide you insight and where your time is spent. And from a carbon perspective, we should be presenting to you so you don't actually track time. You're validating what you've done. And that gives you the insight to know, are you billing appropriately? Are you collecting the profit that you're supposed to collect?
I ironically think that Ackerman is going to listen to this episode. You finally encapsulated everything that we've both been trying to say from different parts of the room.
If we don't get a carbon advertisement, that's our goal for this.
And our whole entire goal has been to become the Karbon podcast.
Is it carbon with a K or a C, Jason?
You need to call it Carbon Con.
This is the Sons of CPAs with Jesus Acerman and Scott Scarano. I can't even find my...
We've got a special guest this week, Ian Vacin, I believe, co-founder of Karbon with the K. Chief Marketing, is that your title?
No, I'm Chief Bottle Washer, Janitorial Services. Anything that needs to be cleaned up, that's usually on my plate. I'm Chief Customer Officer.
With an engineering background, this is what I always think of when I think of Ian, is very practical and very processes oriented.
Well, you were, okay. That's the first question.
Yeah.
Because this is the biggest frustration from us on the accounting side, is we're like, we want these features, but they never come out on the products.
You've never been a software developer.
Oh, that's what I'm getting at. So explain to us from the software side, why is it so hard to develop these products?
So it's a couple of things. It's a good question. So Jason, imagine that there's you times 30,000 of you.
Yeah.
And that you all have a feature that you want that has to be prioritized in order to try to create the max.
So he has a problem in life. He has a problem knowing that there's 30 other employees that his dad that works for his dad, and he has to fight for his dad's attention. So now he's just fighting for yours.
Yeah.
But that's one piece. The second piece of it, depending on what you're asking for, some things are super easy, some things are super complex. Some things, when you work on them, when you get a team of engineers to drive down a particular level of functionality, you get more economies of scale by sitting in that area for longer and extrapolating it out, which might seem like some of those things don't have merit because they're not bigger items. But for you to go back into it later will take so much more work. So you try to polish things up and go a little bit deeper than you normally would. Other things come up where the business needs just instantly change, just like you guys. All of a sudden, you're trying to drive down one side and then you've got a shock to the system that you have to redirect the efforts. It becomes easier and harder as you get bigger. So when you start adding more and more engineers and engineering teams, you actually get diminishing returns. It's easier to have a smaller team than a larger team because of coordination on one thing. So imagine if you guys are all working together on one tax return. If you did it by yourself, you don't have to deal with the complication of others. You just kind of power through it. But if 6 of you are working on it, yeah, you can get it done faster, but now you got coordination problems to get it done. And so size of the company, which is why you see the bigger guys like Intuit and whatnot, they actually per engineer get much lower productivity than we do with a smaller number of engineers. So there's a balance that you have to coordinate within there. There's a lot of different factors that drive to certain things being done. And sometimes you realize that the quickest path to the better answer isn't necessarily what you, Jason, have said that you want fixed, but it might be I need to fix 5 or 6 other things to do the thing you want better, which requires me to do all the other things beforehand. So this goes back to Bernie, love him. Remember when we changed the colors and some fonts and some other stuff? And he's like, why in the heck did you do that? That was like a year ago.
Yeah.
Well, it was a necessity for one of the major features in order for the feature to operate correctly. And we had to go into that code anyways. So we made the adjustments and process to work on something else. But it was a fair comment. But again, not everything you see is because that is the thing we're working on. It might be working on something else that happens to be a dependency.
You talked about prioritizing. How do you do that? If you have these 30,000 people all wanting something, how do you figure out what's really important?
We drive the business by 3 different metrics. We drive it by sales growth, because the more we can grow and sell, the more money we can invest back in the business to be able to deliver more resources, more product and those types of things. Number 2 is net promoter score. we're looking at satisfaction rates and understanding per firm, per user, and per type of user, how we're performing. And so right now, we talked about this beforehand. We were talking about the calendar, my week. Those are things that if you're in the app every day and you're using it, you struggle with that. So the Net Promoter Score is showing that we can improve on the individual usage patterns of folks. And that's one of the areas of it. And obviously there's a lot of feedback around having that functionality. And then the third thing is really around what we call net dollar retention, which is, are we able to keep your engagement and your satisfaction over time? Are you able to grow your firm on our platform? Because then we're tied together. If we can show that we're able to help you expand who you serve and how you serve them, then ultimately you're going to keep us as a platform of choice. So we measure the business by those three parameters. And when we go to look at prioritization, we're looking at how we balance those in the projects where they sit within that and making sure that we have that balance. The one that doesn't sit on there, and there's two other ones that from an engineering standpoint, I don't look at those, but the engineering team does, is platform and then innovation. So platforms around, when you guys go on there, it should be really, really responsive. You click something on the search just pop. You put a new contact in there, it should ripple through the whole app. So the amount of time it takes for you to get response or get your things done is really critical. And we measure that really closely. And then the second one is, are we building the stuff that you guys haven't thought of yet that can change the game for you so that you're able to be more productive, more satisfied from what we do? And those are things that aren't necessarily feedback, things that you give us. So when you guys put stuff in help and feedback, we read every single one of those. When we meet with you guys and we're looking at what you do, we're watching and understanding kind of what you're trying to do and why we didn't do it well. And that step goes back into our feedback in order to figure out what to build.
So for me, the thing that no one else did, that Karbon did, was triage the emails. Like you guys, that was something that we had
That's not really
about.
true. That's not really true because back when I was ready to use Karbon, there was something else that did triage. The other company that I ended up using, Excello, was better. And we're not talking about us, but I think that it's not fair to say that Karbon was the first to do something.
To ran the parade.
You can though. Keep going.
For an accounting software, which you guys were designed for. When we were looking for practice management solutions, that wasn't a feature that you're really looking for.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that you had that you're like, wow, that's really going to save a bunch of time.
Two things on that. And Tim, you know Tim really well. Tim worked in firms beforehand, but when we started Karbon, he actually spent his time working for other firms for 3 months prior to us even starting to build the product. And we all spent time in firms trying to analyze where the failures were based on the hypotheses that we had. And one of the things is we would sit and let's say you guys were in the office, you'd have a co-located space, you'd have 6 people working together, and literally they would be shoulder to shoulder, and the communication would come in and somebody would start working on it and and the person next to them wouldn't even know. And then they would duplicate the same work. And that was one of the observations that we kept seeing, that even with the situation where people were in close proximity, they had no idea what anyone was working on, and it caused so much turmoil. Now, Scott, to your point, yeah, there were other things that were bringing communications together, but not in the way that we did it. We, for better or for worse, decided to deeply integrate with Gmail and Office 365. The amount of work that it takes, we now have a lot of folks that try to replicate that today, but they don't have the 7 years that we've had to come through in this experience to understand the security on it, to understand all the permissions, all the coordination of the conversations, how you handle BCCs, CCs, and 2s, how do you track it, how do you even place it on a timelines. There's a lot that goes into that. And that's the thing that's separated.
Well, practically speaking, when you look at Karbon, it works because you think it's going to work like it's supposed to. And you guys have been very good at keeping things simple enough when we went to that different product. They successfully did the Facebook feed, where you can look at a client and look at the feed, and everything that happened with them is all there. And you guys just couldn't do recurring work items. And that was all I needed at the time. So we just said, peace out, Tim. We'll be back. We're small potatoes compared to what you guys normally deal with. Let's do the intro to the podcast, because this was like the good segue in. This was now we're going to play the music. And
See, Ian, you have to learn something. Scott there's no order and focus, and this is just going to go in circles.
You work with people like me, though. You probably deal with people like me all the time.
So this is why we get editors and they get a lot of money, So then they're going to spice this back up, put it back together.
Yeah, Scott's the editor, so that's why.
You know what? You can hear the ice cream truck going by right now. I told my kids, it's a funny story. I said, hey kids, if you can hear the ice cream truck playing music, they're just being nice to let you know that they have no more ice cream. So that way you don't run out to the front door. And it wasn't until my daughter was 10 and my son was 8 that they found out that it was the opposite. And now they're still mad at me.
Wait, why would they still be driving around if there was no ice cream in there?
Okay, do your intro real fast because you got
the intros. This is intros done. Hello and welcome. You threw me off, dear Lord. This show is meant to inspire Jason Ackerman to change. Please listen to us as we question his norms at his firm and ask unanswerable questions with awesome people in this space as we try to change Jason Ackerman's firm. He has too much money and inertia. Let's begin with the sons of the CPAs.
Ian, Scott's just mad that I'm the last person who doesn't keep track of time. Scott went back on time. He uses your time functionality, and we're the last ones.
I'm absolutely loving your functionality of time. You guys changed my mindset on running a practice.
Thanks, man. I still sticks with me, Jason Bernie, when he said the only people that track time are those in prison. I like Bernie. I didn't know what
he's putting me in prison now. I feel like I'm in prison. I'm outside of his circle. He fucking hates me now.
Okay, let's get back. So what do you think? Like you mentioned some, like the triage kind of changed like the way we work. What's something that you're working on that maybe you can tell us about, or maybe just something you see in accounting that needs to change that's going to
I want to hear about Ian. Let's go deep on Ian first. Ian, tell us about you. This is what we always
just ignore my question.
Just ignore this question for now. We'll get back to it. I'm going to derail this guy and let him ask his practical questions. Let's just hear about you, Ian. Tell us about you.
There's so many things going on. So for me as a person, I was an athlete before I got into any of this stuff. I was a downhill ski racer and did that through.
You're still an athlete though.
I am.
Carry yourself like an athlete.
I'm broken, Scott. But I'm built like a bowling ball. I'm good going down a hill, like downhill skiing. Not necessarily good running on the triathlon. I'm kind of slower in that.
Coach Ian now. You could coach, right? I'm sure you take your kids out.
I coach the kids' baseball teams. I do help out in the soccer teams. I do coaching tennis. But when we go out hiking a lot, so I'm more of an outdoors person.
Cool.
Profession-wise, the reason why I got in the profession, I did a lot of semiconductor and supply chain stuff beforehand. And I got to where I was running as one of the executives companies back in the late 90s. And a lot of bad stuff happened, but we weren't looking at the financials. We didn't really have a good finance function, and basically the firm would belly up. When you have to let about 100 people go and you go through that experience, it's pretty life altering. So I made a promise to never have that happen again. So I went back to grad school and I said, hey, I'll take a job at the place where that would happen. I went to Intuit because I figured if I could figure out and build a product that support the finance function in general, then I would not have to go through that to myself, nor would others have to go through that same sort of thing. And so that led to where I was working on, I worked on every version of QuickBooks. I worked on Quicken. I did not work on TurboTax. And I ultimately landed in the accountant division. And I realized at that point that the folks who really make a difference are the accountants and the bookkeepers in the world, because they're the ones that are doing the things that I never had in my first business. And they're the ones helping to shape the future of those companies. That's where it really stuck. And then that's where my career from there has gone, where again, my whole focus when I wake up is support you guys. If I can do that, then I make a difference with the many different customers and clients that you guys have that are the people like myself that needed that help at that point. So that's a little bit about me.
Your why exudes in what you do with people, you in particular. You do actually care about what you're saying. Like, I'm going to talk about this product because I care about how well it's going to work at your firm and how well it's going to impact your clients and how well it's going to impact your employees.
You guys were going for, and Jason, you were asking a little bit from a profession standpoint in the industry, whatever word you want to use. I get very frustrated with what I think are folks taking advantage of people's lack of understanding of the technology landscape or how work's done or how other practices perform and so forth. And you guys are a good example of, you guys are always sharing, helping others, laying others stand on your shoulders. But I do feel like there's a bit of some folks that are more like snake oil salesmen. I feel like there are folks that put themselves on pedestals that don't necessarily should be there. And so I try to stay very genuine. I want, as one of the co-founders here at Karbon, what we do in every interaction we have, whether or not you want to work with our product or not, you should always be able to take that and be able to step forward with your practice or make a difference in what you do. And so it's not just about making a buck, it's about making a difference. And that's very different. And that's why we have all the resources that we create. It's why we have the product. It's also why we don't necessarily rush to be able to check a box on a feature list. And so you guys get frustrated where, why doesn't this feature come fast enough? We don't want to put out stuff that's not good quality. And we want to make sure we refine it so it works the way that you talked about it, Scott. It should be approachable, easy to understand, do what you think it should do. And under the hood, have that power and sophistication and depth so that you're able to rely on it without having to worry that things fall between the cracks. There's a high bar of delivery there. And so that's what ultimately as a company, I hope we do. And again, everyone that I interact with, I expect.
You guys are masters of the long game too, with a lot of this, with the vision board, like the roadmap webinar. I was thinking about it from the product standpoint of what do people most care about right now and generate hype for it. You have the organizer, and that's going to be like the holy grail of Karbon changes to me. I feel like I've been talking about the organizer the whole time we've had a podcast. Now you get to plan your day first.
This is just a long soliloquy that Scott's gonna have to edit out.
Take it away.
How did you go about starting Karbon? Like, how did you know that this product was needed?
So when we were at zero, back in the day, that was Stuart, John, and myself. We had different times that we could leave zero based on the value of personal equation. Stuart, John, and I would meet at coffee shops regularly once a week and talk about where we saw opportunities and so forth. And we had purchased Workflow Max during that time frame. That was 2012, 2013 time frame. And we saw some merit to Workflow Max, but it had so many huge holes. And we saw just struggles over the time period that were there about how fixed it was, how much rigor it took. Literally, what you put in place and it just wouldn't function right out of the gate. It had workflows that were broken. But there were things about it that made sense. And we had seen this at Intuit. We had seen this at Zero. And the issue was there wasn't a place that you could go where you had the context generating the ability to action it and understand in one whole view what you should do next and how to get it done. And so at the time, there were things like Slack, Asana technologies. If you look at what we built, we had inspiration from many of these different pieces, but it was the understanding that the communications upend the work, and the work has a very high volume in a repeatable fashion. That's to your point, Scott, of the recurring work schedules, right? So we knew we had to create that recurring work schedule, but you can't get to that unless you've really been able to create the floor of work and the floor of communications. And it was the high volume of work and the high volume of communications that's very unique to the accounting profession, but also just in knowledge work and service industries. We've got a lot of familiarity with the accounting profession, and that's where we started to go down and dive deeper in what if we married those two things together and what could we do with it? And that's where we did that exploratory research in other firms and we started to piece the puzzle together. But essentially you go onto the Karbon app and you'll see those modules. You'll see work, you'll see to-dos, you'll see triage, you'll see insights. Those are the different components that have to work together so you can run a firm.
For traditional firms, and they look at Karbon, what's the hardest sell for them? What's like the biggest thing?
The two biggest ones that have been coming forward was time and billing. So it's funny, guys, if you're in a firm that's 50 seats, 50 employees or larger, generally the partner is a tax partner. And where they really get out of bed in the morning is that they can bill. And they just want to be able to see the completed work and bill the client and collect. And we don't do that. And we get a lot of pressure right now because in order to do billing right, you really have had to have done time and budgets well. And so folks feel like, they're going down a highway that doesn't lead anywhere, but it does. We got to continue to build the road. So we build the road and we create a detour and then we'll finish the road and then you'll get to where that is. So that's one piece. The second piece is we do file management today, but there's this ever-present understanding or want that documents need to be better managed. documents need to live in a place that they're meant to go. I don't wake up every day thinking about how to create the best document management system. And neither should anybody else in this space. That belongs to the Box, the Dropbox, the Smart Vaults, the Google Drive, the OneDrive. But the thing is that in a product like this, there's really three spheres you guys all work in. You've got your work that you do, you've got your relationships that you manage, and you've got the finances that you control. We focus on that work piece, but we have to create the connective tissue to the other two realms, which means we have to build a lot of those connected pieces so that you're able to have all that stuff work seamlessly together. And so that's what we're pursuing with a lot of these different pieces, is that interconnectedness.
I love that. So what's the
Stool, what were the three pillars of the stool again?
Relationships, work, and financials.
Relationships, work, and finance.
Oh, that's going to be on a poster in Scott's office in about 10 minutes.
The nexus of them is your reporting.
So
the seat is your reporting, or your back office almost. Your back end is your back office. That's what you sit on. That's your. But every firm needs a back office. Every front office needs a back office, and Karbon is the back office, right? And you guys have mastered the flywheel or you're getting there to mastering the flywheel of the back office. When I see the vision board, it's you guys are going to master that whole flywheel and that inner core.
I push back on that, Scott. I don't think we would be the masters of all those things. Here's the problem. I think this is where a lot of companies get themselves in trouble, is you do certain things really, really well. And then you make inroads to make other things work well. But when you decide that you're going to try to be the be all end all for all things, you end up doing nothing well. And so we're about the work. That's where we live, and that's where we breathe. We will expand that sphere, but we will not be those other two. We're not going to do the financial stuff. We're not going to do the.
I believe you. You're not going to take over and be better than anybody. You're going to make your product better and to solve the core problem. And you want to solve it the right way. So you're going to go down these own roads and then still beef up your core product. I agree with you, but I disagree.
What did you just say?
We disagree.
Okay. When you talk with most firms, what's like the biggest problem you think that they have? Like these traditional.
I'm flabbergasted about how firms operate without having clear understanding of their operations. Firms, they'll want to come on to us and I'll go, how do you run? How do you do what you do? What are your services? How do you deploy them? And they're like, yeah, it's in somebody's head, or yeah, we've written them down here. And I look at the thing that's written up and it has no substance. To run a really well-oiled machine, your IP is how you deliver service, which should be documented, which should be refined, which should be the thing you optimize month over month, quarter over quarter. You have to be a really good operator. That means you got to create the system, that the automation or the systemization of it, in order for you to constantly know if you're improving day over day. And so I'm shocked by how many firms don't have, and it hurts me when I go and I see that folks just don't have anything to work with. That's why we created the template marketplace, so that template library that went out recently.
That template thing was so cool. And even if it took a couple days, I don't know what it took, but to get that loaded in there and have it be a process that we already knew of, that was just effortless.
Now it's a click and it executes in a click. I think if I was to own one of the practices, I mean, that's what you guys do really well. I'm giving you guys a lot of credit. You guys know what your service delivery is, and you guys focus and deliver in on it. That's how you're able to, if you should raise fees and if you're doing well or not. But if you don't have that, you're just running blind.
But it's also why we were able to take on something like Karbon and justify the price of it as early as we did. The biggest critique that I would hear was Karbon's too expensive. I would laugh.
The Ackermans were on it. B&A was on it pretty early on. Ironically, I should say relatively fixed over the duration of time.
When we try to promote Karbon, and I feel like Ackerman, we have gotten the same pushback to our peers, is Karbon's too expensive.
Like, that's their downfall.
You guys have mastered the long game. I'm trying to drive the point. I was saying a lot of other software providers will play the price game with you, and that's not fair to the user, right? I don't think it is.
We are definitely one of the more expensive products, and what that comes with is the burden that we have to continue to develop and make it impactful each and every day. That's the difference. Where going for the short game, that's not going to work.
You got Bernard in here.
I know. What's up, Bertie?
Well, I gotta he can't hear because it's on here, and then I gotta
We
go.
see Birdie's crotch and his pecs, but that's about it.
Okay, what's one bit of advice you could give other accounting firm owners? If you could give them one piece of advice.
The biggest value you can give is to spend the time with the clients that matter by hearing what they have to say and then telling them what you truly think they should do. The reality is most small business owners don't have the confidence to really know what to do. And their finance function is probably the most astute. And whatever advice or things that you can, the time you spend there being able to be their psychologist, being their valued advisor, being their ability to see into the future, things they did in the past, how they impact what they're doing today, that ultimately pays itself in spades. And so it's not about the transactional one. I know we talk about advisory, but it's really, you're their support. You're their pillar. You're their strength. You're the one that has the knowledge that they don't have. And so when you're able to illuminate that, it will pay both sides beyond what it is that you guys agree on year over year. And so that would be the thing I would tell folks. And that's the thing I missed when we started this conversation. That was what I wish I had back when I ran my first company back in the 90s that failed. If I had had that, I probably wouldn't have gone down the same path that I'm on today.
I love that. Ian, this has been amazing. I'm going to let Scott take over. You're going to hear a lot of random talk. Bernard says goodbye. We'll see you in person next year at Karbon Con.
Yep, definitely, Jason.
Usually he's my steering engine. He keeps the train on the tracks. So the train's about to go up. So I'm going to open it up.
Let's do rapid fire, man.
Rapid fire. Yeah. When you think about the future of the industry, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Worry. Worry is where I go.
Why worry?
So I get the luxury of seeing the research because I'm a big research person. Conducting it, I've reviewed it, I've been a part of it. Intuit was a research machine. I carried that when I went to Xero. And so I've been able to see that over the span of now 20 plus years. And there is little human capital growth inside of the profession. There is a large amount of business turnover, and there will be hopefully a large amount of business starts coming out of this particular COVID situation. We have an average age that seems to be getting older by the year. You've got a large number of older professionals who have to retire. Many couldn't retire because of the 2008 crisis, and they dialed that to crises in the 10s, and now we have COVID. But the passing of the baton or the torch is still like you guys, you and Jason.
Or the sons of CPAs, right?
Sons of
the
CPAs,
next generation.
the daughters of CPAs.
Yeah. I like to say the children of CPAs, but that sounds like a horror movie. So sons and daughters sounds more communal.
But what I worry is, has the older guard been able to spend the time and given the freedom to the new group coming in to be able to drive it to a new place? And there is a large separation, in my opinion, between the firms that have really been able to train up and give the capability and the opportunity to those, because they've been slow to change. And we've been in a very change-ridden environment for quite some time. And you look at technology adoption, maybe that's an indicator. You look at culture and how firms manage culture and what they put in place. Compare that with more dynamic professions and industries. And it just, things always seem to take a lot longer. And I look at who are the folks that people look to and guide themselves. And it's to the folks that are continuing to bear the torch in the order guard, where you've got some really powerful young firms that are doing magical things, but it's not necessarily being taught and transferred and replicated. Because the more of those firms that are like you guys that are evolving, the more it plays an impact again back to the businesses that they support.
But if you really dig in, if we could change the model, then we could change the industry too. That next generation will be looking at the generation before them. It's a generational shift. You've got a lot of younger generations that don't want to change because there's a lot of money tied up. They're very impressionable and they don't really see the client as the good guy. They see the client as the person paying them. That's a mindset shift.
Well, it's a business, right? And if your livelihood hadn't gone through the last 20 years of just unexpected turmoil, you're reticent to change. You want to make sure that the dollars keep flowing at the amounts that they're flowing because your retirement's hinged on it. There are very fair and reasonable reasons to not wanting to embrace the change, right? So it's all individualistic. It's not something you can just generalize. There's a new guard coming, and the question is whether or not they're going to be able to ramp up fast enough. One of the interesting stats when I met with a lot of economists 2 years ago was the worry about a Great Depression happening in the 2030s, early 2030s. And that's because the millennials as a tax base doesn't get into full swing, but you've got the baby boomers who are going into retirement where the tax base leaves. And so there's a productivity gap. That may not happen now with COVID and what has occurred. I don't know where that stands, but there are just some macroeconomic and macro factors that you have to take into account in this whole equation.
Well, that it could have steered things off in the wrong direction for COVID and a lot faster too.
Yeah.
There's some areas of the market and the economy that have just sped up. So we may get it accelerated to 20.
Well, it may have caused the correction, right? Anytime you get a large shock to the system, however the system responds could be an accelerant, both positive or negative. We just don't really know. We'll see that play out. We are in a very interesting time. It is very quintessential and critical. Everyone out there listening as professionals, think about what we just went through over the last 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And you realize how darn important the financials and the management of them and the advice and everything else tied to it is to the success of the full economy, not only in your local neighborhood, but nationally and globally. It's all intertwined. You can't rest on your laurels, but you got to think about how to be more productive. You started off this with talking about time, right? I've gone in conflict with time and management thereof because I'm a purist as well. I never wanted to build time inside of Karbon. But the reality is you have to understand profitability. You have to understand where you're spending your efforts and where you're going to capitalize on that so you can double down, where you can cut bait on things that you're not doing well. And that requires you to have insight in that. It shouldn't be up to the practitioner to track time. It should be up to the technologist to help provide you insight and where your time is spent. And that's where, from a Karbon perspective, we've taken ownership of that. We know what you've clicked. We know what you've worked on. We know where you've been looking for information. We soon will know what you've done in your calendar. We should be presenting to you so you can validate that indeed you spent it in those locations. And so you don't actually track time, you're validating what you've done. And that gives you the insight to know, are you billing appropriately? Are you collecting the profit that you're supposed to collect?
I ironically think that Ackerman is going to listen to this episode because he wasn't here. And this is going to be the first time that he comes back and says, see, I told you, because you finally encapsulated everything that we've both been trying to say from different parts of the room. And I want my people to be able to control their day. I don't want to look to see if they track their time. I don't want to measure against them. I don't want to say you didn't work this many hours a week. I don't want any of that. But what I do want is a clear dashboard of what's going on in the firm and where the resources are so we can reallocate if we need to, when we need to. And we want to manage from Karbon. We could 10X everything that we're doing with that last piece of the puzzle. And that piece inevitably is time right now because it's the one resource that we can't replicate, that we can't just print more of, that we can't just flush the economy with because that's finite. Finite is time. And I don't want to end the conversation at times. The one important point I want to ask first, is Stuart an optimist or a pessimist when you ask him about the future?
Stuart's an optimist.
So that's why you guys work so well together and you should be worried about the future, right? First thing you said was worry. But when I see him talk, his visions in the future is very bright, right? I feel like the people I work well with, I'm such an optimist that I need somebody to anchor me. And whatever I think is great about the future, like my wife is a great anchor for me. We work well together within our family because she's realistic, not necessarily a pessimist, just a realist.
Your observations are relatively good. From leadership team is you want to be able to create a strong leadership team that's complementary. We've done those strength finders, but we did it after the fact. Stuart, he is very good at looking at the 1 year plus, 2 years plus, and being a visionary and bringing people along for the ride and motivate. I'm a tactician. I'm an operator. And so I look very closely within 1 year in to understand, are we getting the most out of everything that we put our efforts against and driving to those short and medium term goals? It's not that I'm pessimistic. I'm more cautious and more conservative in my approaches because Stuart, there's only plan A. For me, I'm thinking about plan A, plan B, plan C, because when I wake up every day, I know of all the people that we employ. I know all the customers that we serve, and I need to make sure everyone's taken care of. For Stuart, it's about upending the stamp status quo and getting to a new place that no one's ever imagined. And John is the third piece of the stool. John is our CTO and heads of everything product. He is much more pessimistic because in every day he wakes up, he needs to make sure the platform's stable, the responsiveness is high, the delivery of product is at the pace that we need it to be. He's always worried about what could happen. And that's why the three of us work very well together.
You introduce some color to the yin and the yang. You do need that third person. And you need, I feel like though for Stu, if I'm relating to what you're saying, it's like he can see plan A. And then once you tell him plan B is viable and plan C is viable, they'll start to fill those in. And when plan A dies, plan B to him is already a reality because you showed him that light. And for most cases, you have to be ready for plan A to die, but you have to be all in too. Like Stu would have to be all in on plan A to sell that vision to everybody. Once you start illuminating the plan B vision, nothing collapses when plan A doesn't work. Plan B turns into plan A. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right way to interpret it.
We saw this observation in the days of Zero back in the early days. There was three folks that ran together. It was Rod Drury, Ali Gregg, and Ross Jenkins. Now it's CFO with the COO and the CEO. And they also had similar personality traits. Rod's a massive visionary. Ali was much more pragmatic. Ross was the mediator between the two. So generally these things work in threes. And into it, when I was there was also a point where they had three people that were running the entire operation. Yes, three folks together. And I think you need to have that capability as you get larger. You need to have all sides of that coin covered because that helps you see things and be able to grow to places that you wouldn't otherwise been able to get to.
Tell me what you think. Paget with Jeff Phillips, Amanda, and that 3-person tier at Paget. Scott one day.
Yeah. You've got more of the visionary stuff. Jeff is more of the pragmatic. He's got that sort of tactician operator side of him. And Amanda's in that middle ground.
She's very practical. She's the CPA. She's also very visionary too.
Yeah.
But
I say
showing a lot of stuff. Yeah.
She's the sort of mediation. You need to have that balance. You can't have too many cooks in the kitchen.
I'm not even cooking there. There's enough cooks there. And Roger's there too. I don't know if you've ever met Roger. He's awesome. And the way that they're all working together, I see some kind of symmetry. I won't say continue to thrive because they still have a lot of work to do. There's an organization here that can thrive. They're getting there. I'm so excited about it. I'm seeing things in a light of there's future for the organization I'm directly tied with. I see a company that I want to keep working with and keep growing with.
But at the end of the day, it comes back to it. And this goes back to just relationships, right? You want to work with folks that you trust, you respect, you admire, and you feel like you can grow with, right? And I think that as we get older, you appreciate those relationships. And when you spend 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day doing what we do, that those relationships kind of blend over. For me, I'm really happy to be on this with you guys because there's a high level of respect there, trust and appreciation and admiration. And so those are the things that make things. It's not just about turning a crank or making $1. It's about making an impact and working with great people. And that's what, carries you through all the different years. It makes things a joy. And when you have that, you do your best work.
Yeah. To help build off the shoulders. Like you said, everything that's working for me and my peers, that people that are trying to start doing it themselves, they can start looking at these kind of seeds in different places because there's no wrong way to do something, but there's a better way. There's a better process. And we're starting to see that that's going to be common speak. Like you could be very binary about things in any industry. You're going to see a lot of us and them.
I think there's been it's interesting. There's always been good sharing. And I think to your point is you may have a better way. Let me learn and build from that. But once I've figured out a better way than what you had, let me share and have you scaffold. It's that scaffolding, that interrelationship that makes things get to a better level and everybody wins in that. And the interesting thing right now, there's no shortage of opportunity, work, clients out there right now. What there's a shortage of is like you talked about, time, resources, and how do you deliver more to be able to provide for your staff and for yourself while enjoying the journey and making it so it's doable and ultimately achievable without going and killing yourself, because that doesn't do anybody a service. And I think that's where I see a lot of sharing, but I feel like my concern is just that there's been so much change that people just don't know which way is up. We get the luxury of being able to see some of the most progressive firms of the planet. So our commitment is, as we observe that, is to write that up and the articles that we have, the playbooks, the ebooks, and those types of things, so we can share that. And that's where hopefully that those insights provide value for those which don't have the luxury that we get to have.
The beauty of your luxury is you can do things very intentionally and curate the right content for the right people. As they continue to grow with your company, they can learn how to better their own company too. And why wouldn't they want to? That's kind of the win-win scenario for anything. A playbook, a template.
It just goes to some of the things that we implied we didn't really talk about. So what are some things that I wish we change, or regrets? Probably not the right word, because I don't really have regrets in that way. But I feel like we get a lot of great input from you, Scott, from Jason, because he talked about what we should do differently. We don't do a great job of exposing that. It feels to a lot of people it goes into a black hole. It actually doesn't. We're looking at that. We're aggregating it. We're understanding it. We don't give that information back, and folks will be like, well, I asked for this. Where is it? And then it appears as an update, and they're like, oh yeah, they finally did this. Well, we should do a better job of doing that information. That's partly why we're doing the roadmap and the vision, but we'll do more there. And then when we talk about being good stewards, a lot of the stuff that we do on what I would call Karbon Academy, which should live and breathe on its own, that is self-serving, yes, but we always went with the intention of that was something that is part of our brand. It's part of what we can give back. It doesn't drive directly to our product, but we do find that when people are going down those paths, that we are in consideration in that journey. But we don't expect nor require anybody to take that and become part of a carbon umbrella or bandwagon. We want them to be able to find that information. And we didn't find that it was coming out at a quality and an understanding that was what we would put that out as. So we took that on our own. And that's just stayed with us since the early days. And it's been a lot of work, but it's also some of the most satisfying and higher points of what we've been able to accomplish. And that's something that we didn't build. That was on the backs of everybody out there that we get the luxury of interacting with. We're just able to articulate it in a way that's consumable. But really, those ideas are not ours. They're really of the profession. If that makes any sense.
You have the microphone to display those ideas to somebody. It should go without saying they are contributing to that, but then you're contributing back. And it's the scaffolding that you were saying earlier. These are experiences that you may expect to have with a friend and not a vendor.
Say to me, you're like, well, I'm not one of your bigger clients. By size is the dictation, isn't the parameter by which we do relationships. Everybody's unique and everybody has the same merit to be at the table.
I say it out of respect to you. I respect that you do have everybody else, but at the same time, I'm still going to open my mouth.
I think that's one of the pieces of advice I learned as a kid. So I grew up, I was in a military family, and we moved around a lot. And so I'm a military brat, and my family didn't have much. And one of the big lessons learned was that it doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter who you are in terms of your race, your ethnicity. Everyone's the same. Nobody's higher up than anybody else. Nobody's more important. Both all at the same level. And you treat everybody the same with the same level of respect, dignity. You shouldn't think you're any better than somebody else. And so I try to do that with all of my interactions. Every one of our customers we cherish, and we try to give as much attention as we can. And every time I do with people on a relationship level, you'll find that if you go to the larger companies, the admins are on the show. If you want to know what's going on, talk to the janitor. My grandpa was the janitor of a school. My grandma was a beautician and cut hair. My dad was in the military. My mom was a teacher. And it's those types of professions that drive what society is today. It's not someone who's got a CEO title or this or that. And that's where, again, I think people lose the fact of humanity and just about doing the right thing and being good people.
People are people. And I was talking to Chris Farrell recently, and he was talking about reggae. I, and we are one. And they use these phrases interchangeably. We're all equal. We're all one. If you can understand that somebody's mindset is we're all equal, then can we use that as a filter for our clients, for our employees, and for everything else that in the realm of we are all one. We're all in this together. And now let's move forward.
Yeah, now I feel you've gone down the kumbaya mode.
So we'll close it out like this. Karbon's the right solution for everybody, and they'll find out in time.
Ask around. The reality is you gotta find the right solution for you. Karbon might not be the right solution, but ask your peers.
That's on them. Yeah.
That's
So Josh Lance is a good example. I was just editing his episode from March. I knew he was the bootstrap, put the Band-Aid on, put the tape on there, doing it with Trello. Then all of a sudden he throws the bomb that he's been on Karbon for about a year. And I just get to hear my reaction on there. But then he's also talking about just the change management and why they decided to move. And it seems very practical because he's also a very practical human. And some of my other peers, I think everybody I know will be on Karbon. So in my own realm, everybody has an iPhone, everybody's on Karbon.
yeah. So again, if they don't know, use an Android.
The overlap for me is Apple or Karbon. You use Karbon internally. You use your own product. If you're using one of them, you're in my little circle. That's a good.
Ironically, we use a stage account. So before people see new features, it goes into that account. And there are times when the account just breaks. And I can't tell you like how frustrating that is when, there's been 2 times where I've just said, you know what, I'm done. And I just turned off the computer and walked away because I couldn't operate without having Karbon there to be able to work from. And that was one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, I actually do understand why it's such a game changer because I can't operate my life.
You just instilled a lot of fear in me now. And I'm going to call my operations manager and tell him if Karbon ever goes down, we are fucked. It's almost like we're done.
Which is beforehand, John, our CTO, what he worries about every day is the platform stability, the performance and everything else. We got that managed.
He's got a red light on always, right? And you're like the yellow light and Stu's the green light. I love it. We'll end on that. How can we find you?
If you got individual questions, feel free to email me. I think it's funny because like my kids tell me, hey, I searched your name on the internet. Why can't I find your email and your phone number and everything else? So all my information is out there. You can email me. It's ian@karbonhq.com. I don't prefer my cell phone because right now I get like 100.
See, this is the perfect time for you to get an iPhone because you can keep that number and use that as your SMS and then you keep your iPhone separate.
This is awesome. I appreciate it. You guys have
Thank you for coming.